everyone, and welcome back to another episode of the Glittering Bell Jar. I am here today with my lovely co host, Valerie. Valerie, how are you?
I am good. I just realized my camera is very dirty. But other than that, I'm good. How are you?
I'm good. I went to the beach of North Carolina, so the coast, this past weekend, and that was so much fun. I am tired, but I'm happy. So,
Yeah, that's what the beach does to people. It makes them get their vitamin C in.
yeah, that's very true. Oh my God.
I got my
Just got
vitamin
that.
I got my vitamin D this weekend. So I don't know if we've talked about it, but I really got interested in Dungeons and Dragons through a couple podcasts I listened to that are obviously not Harry Potter related. And finally, my whole group of people that I've been able to join had our first day of our campaign. And I was very proud of myself for all of you listening who are like, oh, what happened? How'd it go? I slayed the final two baddies at the end. Like I finished the battle. I took them out 1-2 in a single move after having a couple rough rolls, which anyone who knows D&D knows that's just how the game goes.
That is amazing. I do not know what any of that means. However, I've always said I wanted to play, so maybe you'll inspire me to try to get. Maybe I'll get my friend group to play or something. I don't know.
Yeah, it's way fun. Like the podcast that I listened to got me into it because it sounds so much fun and it is very fun. It's like 50% playing and 50% joking and just talking with your friends, which is exactly what you want a game to be.
So, do you feel like I need to listen to a podcast so I'm like really prepared? Because I mean, I'm not Hermione, but I do. I'm very studious, and I don't like going into
It
things blind.
Yeah, it will certainly help you understand the mechanics of the game if you listen to. There's like a bunch of good D&D podcasts, but yeah, it'll
Okay.
give you a sense of like, okay, that's how it works. Like
Yeah.
that's what you do and it's your turn, etc.
Okay. Cool. Yeah, because I like to win. I know you like to win, so a little competitive.
Yeah, well, D&D is not something you can win. And I know we're like way off on a different track here, but it's just like you just want to like get through the campaign and not die. It's like it's not
Okay.
winning, it's just not dying. That's it.
That actually works because the only game I was decent at when I was growing up was like either like dodgeball or pylon ball or whatever. I never got hit. I was so like little and fast that I could just not get hit. So the idea was not dying. So I feel like I could be
We
good at
found
that.
the game for you.
Yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I
I think
actually don't know. I've never really looked, but I've heard a lot of other companies are starting getting into designing their own tabletop games, like Disney's getting into one for Marvel, etc. And so I'd be curious if there's a Harry Potter tabletop game that's actually any good, because it's really hard to make a good tabletop game. But it would be
hmm.
fun if they did have one like that.
Yeah, if you're listening and you know of one, I insist that you let us know.
Yeah,
Email, Instagram, whatever. Let us know.
hit us up on social media at
Yeah.
BeljarPod. You can
Yes,
find us
please.
there. So,
Okay.
anyway, if you are
Yeah.
tuning in today and it is your first episode, you need to go back and start at episode 1 because we are reading Harry Potter and the Half Blood Prince backward. So, luckily for you, there's only a few episodes between here and there. Or unluckily, if you want to binge a whole bunch of episodes, but then just wait a couple days and there'll be a bunch more episodes for you because we are doing something different this season where we are doing one chapter per episode. So every single episode is its own chapter, and we are diving into chapter 27 today.
You ready?
I'm ready. Let's do it.
Okay. Chapter 27 The Lightning Struck Tower. The chapter begins with Harry apparating himself and Dumbledore to Hogsmeade. Dumbledore is extremely ill and can barely walk without the assistance of Harry. They are immediately alerted by Madame Rosmerta that the Dark Mark has been seen at Hogwarts. With renewed strength, Dumbledore leads Harry back to Hogwarts via broomstick. Malfoy arrives just after they do, at the top of the astronomy tower with one purpose in mind: to kill Professor Dumbledore. Dumbledore uses his last few precious seconds to protect Harry and renders him frozen and silent under his invisibility cloak. After minutes of conversation with Malfoy, Dumbledore is able to piece together how the Death Eaters have gotten into the castle with Malfoy's assistance via the matching vanishing cabinets. In the end, Malfoy is unable to finish the task the Dark Lord assigned him, and Snape is the one to render the final blow that kills Albus Dumbledore.
Whew, this is a heavy one.
Mhm.
And the final sentence in this chapter is for a split second, Dumbledore seemed to hang suspended beneath the shining skull, and then he fell slowly backward like a great rag doll over the battlements and out of sight.
Hmm.
we obviously knew where we were going from the last episode, but it is really hard to read these chapters where Dumbledore is not fully in his power anymore. This chapter is Dumbledore is not, he's incapacitated because he's been drinking the potion in the cave, which we'll cover in a future episode. And so he's not that commanding, powerful presence that we've come to rely on him to be in these kinds of situations.
Yeah, it is a dark chapter, which it's still not as dark as the seventh book. Of course, I still even feel just a little bit of, I don't know that levity is the right word because that's usually one moment, but it does feel much lighter than the other book, regardless of the fact that it's already dark, that we are about to lose Dumbledore. It's still not quite as dark, but yes, it is. It is hard to see Dumbledore that way, to see him so defenseless, maybe.
That's a good word for it. I have a question actually about that. So when they arrive back at Hogsmeade, Dumbledore immediately starts telling Harry, I need Snape. Go to the castle and get me Snape. Do you think he's asking for Snape as potion master, or as, I know I'm dying and he's the guy who needs to guide me through this?
I was hoping you would ask that because I also had that question and I'm not sure. I think that Snape could have helped him with the poison because he has ingested a poison, and I would assume that as the potions master, he should be able to give him something to help him or let him know, like, whether that would kill him or not. But since it didn't kill Creature, although he is a different species, I would think that he also could survive it with the help of, Snape. What did you think?
That's a good point. I wasn't sure. In reading it. I was like, I don't know, because Harry's saying, I think you need Madame Pomfrey, and Dumbledore says, no, I need Snape, and he specifically asked for Snape. And I wonder if it's kind of like Lupin, when Lupin needed his Wolfsbane potion, where it's like someone else could make the potion, but Snape is the best person for the job because he's such a good potioneer. Whereas in this case, I don't know, because we know that Snape has made a promise to kill Dumbledore, or to give it to him straight if he's not going to survive. So I just wasn't sure. I was just curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, no, I wondered that too, which almost makes the blow of Dumbledore dying this chapter, this day, maybe even a little less, if that is the case, that he would have had to die either way, that he's already decided to do this thing, and that no matter what happened, that Snape was going to have to kill him today.
Mm-hmm. Well, and it's very interesting because we know from the Prince's Tale that Dumbledore only had a year from the time he injured his hand until the curse was going to spread anyway. So it's like everything's coming together. Dumbledore knows he's at the end of his life, which is probably part of why he makes some of the decisions he does that get him to this point that we'll, talk about in the future. Cut that part out. I need to stop referencing these next chapters. Anyway, I really wasn't sure, but I do agree with you that if not this day, it's got to be soon, within the next month or two, that the curse that Dumbledore has been afflicted with from the Horcrux is going to spread. So Snape also must in some ways know that at a certain point he's going to get the call from Dumbledore, and that it'll be that call.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, which almost makes reading it, I don't know if it's reading it backwards or just, I do think it's reading it backwards. It almost makes it even so much more sad because of how much Harry beat himself up. And we know that no matter what, Dumbledore was going to die within a year. And it just, that fact never seems to, doesn't seem to dissuade Harry from blaming himself. But again, he doesn't really find out to the end of the seventh book. And so it is just really sad to be like, Harry, that you're displacing your anger somewhere it shouldn't be.
Right. You're carrying that guilt because you think you were responsible because you didn't drink the potion when Dumbledore was doing everything he did to get onto the tower and make sure Harry was protected, knowing that even if he survived this night, he didn't have very long to live anyway.
Yeah, exactly. A small thing before we dive in a little further is there was, whenever they land in Hogsmeade, I find it interesting. It says that Harry felt a searing stitch in his chest. And do you think that was like his intuition? I believe that's page 579, but I'm like, was that his intuition feeling that? Like, what was that?
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I've had stitches. I get them from running usually, like physical exertion. And so it's weird because they weren't swimming
Oh.
to get out of the cave. They apparate out of the cave. But to me, like I would get them when I run and I'm like respirating. So maybe it was just the stress of doing his first apparition. Like he leads the apparition and you can't catch your breath in the apparition. Maybe that's part of it.
Okay. I guess that makes sense. Although I feel like later the stitch grew. Like, and that was because he knew something bad was happening. I should have written better notes. Let me see if I put a picture on my notes here. Let me just look really quick. If not, it's fine. We can just, whatever. Yeah, it's okay. It's not that important. I can just cut this part out.
Okay.
Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe it really was just from exertion, which that would make sense. I just wasn't sure. It just seemed like a random thing that was said in the chapter, and I wasn't sure what it meant. But I like that explanation.
Yeah. I mean, to me, every description of apparition sounds awful. So it sounds very physically uncomfortable. So I could see if you're under extreme stress and then you have to apparate, you have to lead an apparition for the first time and it's life or death, that might cause you to have like basically a muscle spasm and you can't catch your breath when you get to the other side.
Yeah, fair. Okay.
So the next thing I had is a whole bunch of notes from the interaction between Malfoy and Dumbledore, which is really the meat of this chapter.
Same.
It's Malfoy explaining everything about how he came to get the Death Eaters into the castle and what he's been doing all year. But the one that stuck out the most to me was the line where Dumbledore basically praises Malfoy for his plan. He says it's actually a pretty darn good plan. And it says Malfoy seemed to draw courage and comfort from Dumbledore's praise, which I immediately interpreted as this is a young man who has not received praise enough. Because even when he's literally opposed to someone and they give him praise, it actually makes him feel better. And I thought that was a really interesting little insight into Malfoy's character. Also, that Dumbledore says, we can hide your mother. Your father's safe in Azkaban. We will move your mother and keep her safe. When we know from last season that it's Malfoy's mom, it's Narcissa that he cares about, that he listens to, that he does everything for. And so it's really interesting because, Malfoy at this point is so terrified of Voldemort killing him and his family. He can't see that there are any other options. But Dumbledore kind of knows what to say to try and convince him.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree. I did like this insight into Malfoy's character, and we talked about it last episode about how Harry actually felt kind of sorry for him, and I think we did too. Once we read that, we also felt sorry for him because he does seem like this very confused kid. He just wants to save his family, and that is kind of all he's been taught by his mother and by his father, is that their family is utmost importance, and I do understand that. And yeah, it is. Yeah, it's insightful just to see Malfoy and how he interacts with that, and that he is so kind of easily won too, because it seems like he was going to give in to Dumbledore. He was like, okay, if he really can't protect my mom, then let's do it. But I will say, and I loved the interaction the most because I loved seeing Dumbledore at work. Because although it was a form of manipulation, he was being true and he was being honest. At his dying, he knew he was, I think, maybe you're right. Maybe Dumbledore was about to die because of the poison, and Dumbledore had kind of resigned to that. And even at his last moment, he was trying to save Malfoy's soul and seeing the best in people. Even at the moment, telling him, do not say mudblood in front of me. Absolutely not. And Malfoy's like, seriously? That's what you care about? I'm about to kill you, and you don't want me to say mudblood? And he's like, yeah, absolutely. Don't do that. Even he's trying to teach him, even as he's like, pretending or thinking he's about to kill him, Dumbledore refuses to give up on good.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it is really interesting to watch Dumbledore be a teacher, basically, because he's not teacher for the majority of the series. I mean, we obviously haven't read that recently. And for those who are listening, new listeners, we are restraining from reading the rest of the series in any order because we're working through on this podcast. But Dumbledore is headmaster, and he doesn't really interact with the students very much. He has very few conversations, very uneducational. This book is really the first time he's working as a teacher when he's doing these private lessons with Harry. And now
Mhm.
you see him doing the same kind of education, trying to help these young people make sense of this very weird and dangerous world that they find themselves.
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. It says he's literally being a teacher, doing like what he does best.
He's trying to save the young men that from making the mistakes maybe he thinks he made himself, right? Because we always have to remember now we know Dumbledore's backstory. So he looks at Harry, he looks at Malfoy, and he sees the young man at the same age when he made his own worst mistakes in his mind, right? And so he looks and he says, like, I do know. Trust me, Draco. Like, you think I'm just always this benevolent, good old man. I was a young man and I made mistakes and I went toward the dark side, and I don't want you to go there.
Yeah, that's an extremely good point. Uh, in fact, I have written down, he even says, killing is not as easy as the innocent believe, which of course leads me to believe, which maybe I'm not remembering correctly, that means Dumbledore has killed because he's no longer considering himself innocent.
Or he thinks, I mean, I would say probably that's him believing he killed Ariana, or believing he doesn't know and he takes the guilt as though he did. He bears that weight because he doesn't know who dealt the killing blow against Ariana.
Oh,
I
stab
know.
me in
I
the
know.
heart, Valerie. God.
Well, that's the only one we know about, but I would guess now that we know. So this is this is actually, we're talking about it. I'm thinking like this is a really good section where we begin to see the character that now J.K. Rowling, writing this Dumbledore, understands the backstory we're going to get in Deathly Hallows. She understands the pieces that make him up, that will make sense of him when we get to the very end, when we meet him at King's Cross and he explains it all finally.
Yeah. I mean, her writing is it's always constantly surprising me, right? You find these little tidbits,
Mm-hmm.
and she just did such a good job of laying that map layout.
Yeah, I was listening to
One.
episode 3 yesterday, and I
Mhm.
realized that we were talking very briefly, and I can't remember if I left it in the final cut or not, about the new Fantastic Beasts movie. And my comment was like, it just wasn't up to the storytelling standards that I have. And I was like, that's because the storytelling standards are so high. This is like, for your first major fiction work to write a 7-book series that you, one, completed, because let's not talk about George R.R. Martin and Game of Thrones, and 2, is so incredibly cohesive and well tied together, is a real testament to her talent. And I know she's been in the headlines lately and it's never good, but these books are truly incredible works of storytelling. And I think that's why people still love them, and they have the power that they do, even against whatever is going on in the headlines.
I mean, yeah, that's why. I mean, we're still talking about it. That's why 20 years later we have a podcast about it,
Mm-hmm.
because it is so powerful, and she did such an incredible job that it's just a work of art.
Mm-hmm.
So one thing, and I almost hate to go backwards, but I have to talk about it just for a split second, and it's back about Draco.
Mm-hmm.
Did you find it interesting? It actually was surprising to me because I didn't remember. There is a moment where Draco kind of snaps and he gets mad because Professor Dumbledore is talking about Snape. And he immediately becomes super jealous of Snape and says that he's going to be the Dark Lord's favorite and he'll forget about Snape. And I found that super interesting because, of course, like you said, the moment Dumbledore gives him an ounce of praise, he is immediately happy. He obviously needs love, but I did find it interesting for someone who we know in the 7th book is understandably extremely, extremely scared of Voldemort and does not like him being in his house. He doesn't see it as, a blessing, as like some of the Death Eaters might. It felt a little almost out of character. It's almost as if maybe maybe it was a turning point where he could have gone one of two ways, like decide, like, if I kill him, I am going to be evil and I am going to be maybe revered by Voldemort. Um, and instead, maybe Dumbledore was able to talk him off that ledge. I don't know.
Yeah, well, and I can't imagine it went well for the Malfoys when all the other Death Eaters report back to Voldemort that Draco couldn't do it. Like, he didn't do the job. Like, yeah, Snape did it. Of course Snape did it, because Snape does whatever needs to be done. And Snape, in fact, and I'm going to jump around, and we obviously are not going to get to this for a while, but the unbreakable vow that Snape has to protect Malfoy and do the work that the Dark Lord has asked, I think compels Snape in multiple ways. So Dumbledore has made him promise to kill him, and Narcissa's her unbreakable vow with him means that he has to protect Malfoy, and that may include protecting his soul. So Snape is like both magically and morally compelled to do what he does when he kills Dumbledore. But I think there's a scene off, like off screen where Voldemort learns what actually happens at the top of the tower, and I can't imagine that goes well for the Malfoys because Draco has failed, even though the final outcome is okay and it was Snape who did it. And like, okay, well, thank you, Snape. Like I'm in Voldemort right now. Like, thank you, Snape. I appreciate it. But like Malfoy, you still fail. Draco, you're still a failure. And so that might be what also brings him to being so afraid of the Dark Lord by that point is something has happened which the Dark Lord has turned against the Malfoys. And we know that from the first chapters of Deathly Hallows where he's making fun of them. He's insulting them in their own home.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I guess you're right. It probably did not go well, but he didn't kill them, which is kind of surprising. And maybe off screen, again, Snape was like, convinced him not to. I don't know. Or maybe, I don't know.
We also talked last season about the sacred 28 or 27, whatever there's only a certain number of pureblood families. So even at the end of Deathly Hallows, Voldemort's willing to take Neville Longbottom, and Neville's like a blood traitor, right? He's friends with, he's on the wrong side, but he's like, but you're pureblood. And that will work through all the other issues we have with your personal beliefs, but we will not spill pureblood if we can avoid it. Because we need, there's only a few families, right? We need everyone you can get on your side. So that might be it too, is like, yeah, I won't kill you, but you're definitely not in my good books anymore. And I'm going to take advantage of you. And I'm going to, I'm going to torture you or whatever I decide I want to do, but I won't kill you, which is actually scarier, I think.
Yeah, no, you're right. That's 100% what it is yeah, they're too precious, can't have too many inbred little witches and wizards running around.
Yeah. The last note that I have from this chapter is the one right at the end where, Dumbledore says to Severus, please, he's asking him to hold. I always read that as he's asking him to keep his word. You know what you have to do. I need you to do it. And it says, Snape gazed for a moment at Dumbledore, and there was revulsion and hatred etched into the harsh lines of his face. And that is such an interestingly written line when we know he doesn't hate Dumbledore and he's not revolted by Dumbledore. It's internal. It's actually for once, well, not for once, because actually Snape does it all the time, where his emotions that he expresses are what he feels about himself. It's over and over, like he just reflects out what he's feeling. And it's all about him having to do this work that he doesn't want to have to do. And yeah, I think that's one of the most powerful lines once you know the full story.
Yeah, I agree. Immediately, it was very, very sad. And that was the moment when I first read the books that I knew for sure. Like I almost always believed that Snape was somehow a good guy. And that was the moment that I was like, nope, he didn't want to do it. He did not want to do it.
See, I didn't know. I did not know. I didn't question that Snape was a bad guy because he looks like a bad guy. He acts like a bad guy. But that's part of the point. We talked about that last episode, I think it was, where we said, the point is that you shouldn't judge people until you know their whole story, until you see everything and all that it means to them.
Yeah. She has a really, really wonderful way of doing that in these books. And you ever wonder how that, we're going too long, but I can't help it, like how that would have affected our psyche as like, I mean, I know I was a little bit older, but like learning those lessons young, that like not judging a book by its cover. And, it's not just about saying it, it's about learning it. And God, these books just do that over and over. Just kind of magical.
Mm-hmm. I think that's why they're so powerful. And they retain that every time you read it, you get that same power back out of them.
Yeah.
Well, I don't think there's any cheery, happy way to wrap this one up. I mean, it's obviously one of the darkest chapters. I think this is one of the darkest chapters in the entire series in terms of the outcome. So I think with that, we will wrap it up. As a reminder, we love to get ratings and reviews. If you are on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, you can go into your podcast player and leave us a 5-star rating and review. We really appreciate those. You can also always email us any feedback that you have. If you heard something or you know about that tabletop Harry Potter game that I really want to be playing and I need to know more about, you can email podcast@followthebutterflies.com. And you can always find us on social media.
Yep. Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, Bell Jar Pod. Please reach out, message me, comment on one of our posts, however you please. I love to hear from you.
Yep. And with that, we'll
All
wrap it
right.
up. We look forward to seeing you at our next episode, and we hope you enjoy it.
Yeah, see you tomorrow.